Hi, my name is Tom Ericsson. I'm a technical sales specialist with IBM. Been with IBM for about 3 years now. Prior to that, I was a customer working with the solution IBM Cognos primarily for approximately 11 years in multiple facets of the solution. So being able to, be an administrator, a data modeler, report writer, an analyst, and so forth. So if you have any questions, let me know. I've also got some cards up here, so if you have questions, that you don't think of, but want to shoot me an email later, more than welcome to do that as well. But really, what I'm here to do today is, demonstrate Cognos and PureData powered by Netezza, and show you the speed that can be gained in terms of report running and performance processing that you'll see running in an appliance on the back end. Working with Cognos for 11 years, I've seen, where reports need to be scheduled overnight and things like that. And, the data volumes that those reports were running against isn't what we're running against here today. Keep in mind, this is a simplistic example, but we're running against some extremely large data sets. Cognos, for this particular instance, is installed locally on this particular VM that I'm running here. The PureData appliance that we're going to be running against is actually hosted in an environment up in Columbus, Ohio. So, we're going across the network here for some extremely large sets of data and pulling that back in sub-second speeds. I was blown away by the performance gains that I saw in terms of running against a local database and then running against Netezza. So what I want to do is give you an overview of some of the reasons that Cognos and PureData play so well together, and then I'm going to talk to you about how to install the Netezza drivers and how to get it all set up, how to get your Cognos environment set up so that you can run against your Netezza environment. So Cognos and PureData, like I said, blazing fast combination. We've got over 100 plus customers that are currently doing this, and there are really 5 main reasons to use Cognos with Netezza or PureData for analytics. You get that interactive analytics capabilities, which allows users to engage in self-service and so forth. You get enterprise capability or scalability to support thousands of users to be able to do this. You get the compelling visualizations which Cognos provides, right? So be it on the web, via mobile, or an email, right? So the Ray visualizations that we talked about in the prior presentation. The queries are optimized, right? So, intelligently balancing your local and your remote data for processing. So being able to balance that and optimize that so that you can get those reports back in optimal time periods. And then, like I said, no time, optimal time periods, right? No wait times. You're not looking at that hourglass, because instantaneous responses with in-memory caching can be achieved, and we do that through the use of dynamic query mode and dynamic cubes, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So Cognos 10 and PDA appliances give you those super fast results that a lot of organizations are blown away by the first time they see them. So there are currently, 3 ways to go about leveraging the Cognos query capability. There's dynamic query mode, which leverages 64-bit Java engine. So, being able to cache more in memory, write more efficient queries, and so forth. We've got dynamic cubes, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's our in-memory aggregate-aware reporting capabilities, and that'll really ante up the performance in terms of running that against the Netezza environment as well, right? So Netezza on its own, the way that we're running it here is against a relational data source, but you can incorporate dynamic cubes into this architecture as well and really start ratcheting up the performance gains, right? Although I don't know how much more you can ratchet them up based on the results that you're going to see here, because I was very impressed by that. And then compatible query mode, right? You don't need to run in dynamic query mode. We've got a lot of legacy customers that are running Cognos 8, and they didn't have dynamic query mode in that particular environment. Well, you can still run compatible query mode against your Netezza environment, right? So for easy upgrade compatibility, right? Reasons that you might want to use Netezza out of box, and you don't necessarily want to change all of your packages to run dynamic query mode, or change your configuration to run only dynamic query mode, right? So in addition to that, you can blend the information, right? You can have some information coming from your Netezza environment. You can have some information coming from your other relational data sources, the way that you would blend heterogeneous environments that you may or may not have in your current environment anyhow, right? So it's just the same paradigm in terms of being able to put those two types of data sets together. We've got security aware in-memory aggregates that allow us to avoid redundant queries. And then the SQL that's generated is optimized for each version of Netezza to exploit its analytical functions and as much as possible. I talked a little bit about dynamic cubes, right? So when we're talking about having extremely large data volumes, and you want to really perform that ad hoc slice and dice against those extremely large data volumes, using dynamic cubes may be a path for you as an organization in that particular instance. We optimize the in-memory caching with in-data processing. So what we do is we load your dimensions into memory based on what users are using or what kind of queries users are running. And the more that they utilize the dynamic cube, the more efficient it becomes, because we can see which queries are being run more often than not, and we can load those aggregates into memory, and then they're almost instantaneous when they're coming back, rather than going back to the data source every time. As well as your in-data processing. So we can do in-memory aggregates as well as in-database aggregates, right? And then I said, it's aggregate aware. So the capability of understanding what aggregates are being used more often than not is something that's very powerful in terms of dynamic cubes and being able to get smarter and smarter the more you use it. So with that being said, I want to share with you the results that were achieved from this particular test. And like I said, when we ran Cognos, we're running it local on this particular VM. It is Cognos 10.2.2 that we're running. And we're running against Netezza, which is not on this particular VM. It is hosted in the Columbus, Ohio service center, right? So what you're seeing on the right-hand side is a chart of two separate reports that were being run against two different packages, right? And a package is the way that Cognos interprets the metadata, right? How it's supposed to run queries and where those queries are going and so forth. The light green one is running against the local data source. It's called Retail Analytics, the package. We're running against retail data in this particular instance. And the dark blue one is running against the Retail Analytics Netezza package. And you can see the report times at the top of those bars. So the first two bars are report 1 and 2, the baseline reports, running against the local SQL Server database on this VM, right? So we're looking at the report times being 5 to 7 seconds, right, in terms of running. That same exact report running against the same exact data volumes, running against Netezza took 2.5 and less than a second to run, right? And then you can see the time slowly increase, but we never even, at the very right side of the chart here, what you're seeing is the Cognos environment running against 100 million records. And we're running in 4.5 seconds and a little bit over a second. That's extremely fast. We're not running local. We're going to Columbus, Ohio to pull this data out of the Netezza environment and pushing it back, okay? So really what you're seeing here on the left-hand side now is the average execution time for each one of those reports matching up to the chart. But in addition to that, I've added a time per record, right? So how much time does it take to process a record for PDA, right? And what I want you to take away here is that the more data there is, the faster it becomes in terms of the processing per record, right? So processing large data sets within the PDA appliance is extremely fast. Your processing time per record decreases as the data sets become larger. You know, in addition to that, when you're doing all this processing, you know, the processing is done as close to the data as possible. So we're pushing that processing down to the data, and then we're just retrieving the results. Okay, so we started off with about 3.2 million records as the baseline, both in SQL Server local running on this VM, and then the baseline on PDA, also 3.2 million records, same exact tables. And what we did is we then exploded that data up to a maximum of 100 million records, right? So we went up from, I think it was 10 million to 20 million to 50 million to then 100 million records. And the dashboard, which I'm going to show you as far as the presentation is concerned, is going to be running against that maximum blown out data set of 100 million records. A quote here from Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Massachusetts: performance is the mantra for us. Embedded larger, extensive data, enable extended visibility into trends, right? So being able to, as a you know, user of Cognos BI on PDA, being able to do lightning fast analytics really is what Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Massachusetts ended up seeing. And being able to do those analytics quickly, you know, can have a life-changing effect for the people that are on the other line, or the other end of the phone, or the individuals that are relying on Blue Cross and Blue Shield to give them the answers that they need quickly and efficiently. So setting up Cognos, how do we do that, right? How do we get it set up so that you can run Cognos against PDA, right? So the first thing is to have the client drivers, and you need to have that installed, and I'll walk you through how that all is done. The second component is to create an ODBC or JDBC connection, or you know, on your server, as well as for Cognos. Configure connectivity to Netezza, right? And then create the Cognos data source. From there, you're going to create a framework manager model and package. So this is starting to sound familiar in terms of people that have used Cognos before, right? And then you're off creating reports after you publish that package out to your Cognos environment. So when you install the PDA drivers, you know, there's two sets of drivers you're going to install. You're going to install the ODBC setup executable. So you're going to select all defaults. The only thing that's a little bit different there is that when you get to the bit size that you want to install both 32 and 64-bit drivers. So that's the only thing that isn't next on this install. And then you run the Netezza JDBC setup.exe, and that's an all defaults setup. So you just go next, install it, and you're done. Very simple. It takes about 5 minutes. Nothing too out of the box there. So the next thing to do then is to create an ODBC connection through your admin console on your server, right? So you open the ODBC data source admin console. So you select the DSN tab, and then you select add, and you select a Netezza SQL from the dropdown, right? And then you would then configure it in terms of the data source, right? Whatever the name of it is, the server that you were hitting in terms of the IP address, the database on that particular machine, and then username and password, as well as port in terms of how you access that particular box. So I've got a little screenshot there of the way that we set it up here for this particular demonstration. The next thing you want to do is create a JDBC connection, so you can open a command window to do that. You change your directory to wherever the JDBC install happened for Netezza. It's usually C:\JDBC, and then you enter this particular command, and from there you can add the content into the screenshot below. Same thing again: data source, host, port, database name, username, and password. Right. So being able to quickly and easily configure it, out of box. So once all of that is done, and for those of you that have worked with Cognos, if you want to run in dynamic query mode, there is some extra files that need to be copied from the client, be it Oracle, Teradata, and what have you. In this particular case, it's PDA or Netezza. Those particular files need to be copied into the Cognos install directory, right? So the nz.jdbc.jar file will need to be copied into your v5 data server.lib directory and your webinf lib directory, right? And why both directories? Well, one is primarily to be able to create the data source connection, the JDBC data source connection in Cognos, and the other one is for being able to model the data in Framework Manager. So, Framework Manager also needs to know. So really, in order for the Netezza driver to be picked up by IBM, once that is all done, once you've copied that one file into those two locations, you'll need to restart Cognos, and then you can start doing your modeling and data source creation and so forth. So the next thing after you restart Cognos is create a new connection in the Cognos admin portal. You're going to select Netezza as the data source type from the dropdown, and you're going to configure both the JDBC and ODBC tabs. Okay. So when you create the connection, by default, that checkbox configure JDBC connection, I believe, is on. Just leave it on, and you'll be able to configure both. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to jump into the demonstration here. Are there any questions at this particular juncture? Okay. So for those of you that are familiar with Cognos, when you log into Cognos, there's obviously a folder structure that's usually laid out by functional area within your business. That's the way I used to do it when I worked with Cognos. In this particular case, I'm going into retail analytics, and I'm going to open a workspace. Remember that unified workspace that we talked about in the presentation that I did prior to this demonstration? Well, this is that location, right? So being able to open this up, and what this is going to do is it's going to run against the Netezza environment, and what we're going to see here is once these come back, you're obviously seeing the record counts from the tables that are available for that environment. So all of this came back in under 5 seconds, right? So I want to give you an overview of Workspace, right, and what it is. So along the top-hand side, what you've got here is, a file menu that allows you to do, several different things, being able to launch into different locations within your IBM solution. You're able to create new, open, existing ones, save, print. When you're printing this, it prints more of a PDF style rather than a web page style. Sharing this out to your organization, you can select what components of the workspace to share, right? Because the way we look at it is this could be completely dynamic in the sense that people can drag and drop content onto it, or it can be static in nature, just a traditional dashboard, right, that you don't want to change, right? So being able to share it out and say, all right, there's no way to change anything. You can, no application bar, no global area, nothing, right? So being able to just share it out that particular way. In addition to that, you can embed this into third-party portals via our portals capability, so that if you want to embed this into an intranet site and not have to reauthor it, that capability is there for you as well. We talked about being able to collaborate and create activities and so forth. That's what you can do here in terms of collaboration and creating activities. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I walk through this demonstration for you. I can edit the layout and style. And the reason I might want to do that is if I wanted to change the background color or create an image that is the background, I can change the way the tabs appear on my workspace, right? I can have multiple tabs, like an Excel spreadsheet, right? You might have specific content on each tab. You can change the way that that's displayed, be it on the bottom, the top, or hidden. You can change the way the widgets are displayed, right? What the background color on them is, and so forth, whether or not they have borders. And the reason we do this is to allow you as an individual that's coming in and using this particular capability to have the maximum flexibility to create a cohesive look and feel, right? Because not every report developer or author is going to develop a report the exact same way, right? You might try to push out templates and so forth, and most of the time people would adhere to that. But there can be instances where components aren't developed exactly the same, right? And for that instance, if I change the way that I want to size this, the widgets react in a way that resizes them to fit based on what it is that you're putting together. Along the left-hand side, I've got a global pane here, and this is, you can hide and show this, right? I've just by default shown it. And what I can do here is put filter capabilities around driving action onto my dashboard, right? And if I've got multiple tabs, I can drive that action from this global area to every single tab that I've got on my workspace. And it's nice because what I can do there is save real estate. I don't need to repeat filters on every single tab on my workspace, right? The other way that I've seen this used is a global KPI area that maybe you want to display for all of your users, but you don't want to take up the real estate on every single tab of the workspace. You can place this here, and then users can hide and show it based on their individual needs. The right-hand side gives me a display of my public folder area in terms of what I've got in my folder structure, right? And then I can drag and drop content from my folder structure here. So any report object that I have, if I want to take parts of it, what we call widgets, which is what these components on this workspace are, I can drag individual components on and off the workspace. So just click it and drag it over kind of movement, right? So being able to put that on there. This is searchable. So if you don't know where something exists as a business user, you can search for it. Not only will it search for the name of the report that you're searching for, it'll also search for the content within the report itself. So the metadata tag, say you're searching for revenue, it'll come up with a list of things that have revenue in the title, as well as a list of things that have revenue within the report itself. Okay, there's a toolbox here. So think of this as like a My Yahoo page, which you can build out to meet your needs. So you can add action buttons, filters, and images, so forth. So if you drag for example, a filter onto the canvas, what it'll do is it'll actually pull all the widgets on this particular canvas and say, these are the things that you can actually filter by. So, and as I hover over this, you can see how they flash in the background. So, for example, if I select region, all of the widgets, I've got 4 widgets on this particular workspace here, would adhere to that particular filter, right? Same thing with type, which would be the store types, right? In town, mall, and so forth. All 4 of them would adhere to that particular component. I can change this from a radio button to a checkbox. So if I want to combine 2 different data objects into one singular filter, and this is nice for individuals that don't have perfect databases. And I know that everybody here probably has one of those, but not everybody has one like that. So if you've got components that have the same type of data in it, so I'm going to just use time as an example, and one of them says YRS for years, and the other one says years, but they have the same data types in them. They're all the same years, right? Being able to combine those from 2 different data sources just by combining this via the checkbox here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a role of an executive here, and I'm going to come in and look at my workspace, and it's giving me an overall view of my units and margin by state in terms of what we sold and what margins we're making. I'm looking at my margin by region and the store types, right? So taking a look at these, I can hover over them, and it shows me the store type, the particular region that we're looking at. On the bottom here, I'm seeing it by store, right? How many units are we selling by store? And then the units by cluster in terms of the store types. And never mind this increasing, decreasing here field, because what we've done is we've repeated the data, so that may look a little strange to you. I can add comments to these. particular widget. So if I want to add a comment here, right, I can add comments around the one that exists. I can delete the comment, you know, or I can edit it in terms of what it was put in. But I put a comment in here as an executive: research the Midwest margins, please, right? I'm also going to create an activity here around this to review the Midwest margins, Midwest region margins, right? And once I do that as an executive, instead of sending an email out to my management team saying, hey, can you put together a work group to research these particular margins, and then having that, you know, go into the black hole that is the email process, right? I've got a trackable activity now within my workspace. I can come back as an executive and see what the status is. If there's anything new, I'll actually get alerts when things are changed or assigned back to me to review, and so forth. And it's all within this unified workspace that I'm working in. So I've created this activity, and now I'm going to switch hats, and I'm going to play the role of an analyst that's come in. I've just sat down at my desk. I've grabbed my cup of coffee. I've taken a sip, opened my email, and I got an email saying, hey, there's been an activity created for you within Cognos, and you need to come and take a look at these margins or review them for the Midwest region. So as an analyst, I come in and I look at this exact same workspace that my executive looked at. And what I can do is start playing around with it a little bit, right? So what I might want to do is, you know, turn on a master filter here to drive content. So if I want to take a look at maybe the Southeast region and figure out what's going on there, I can drill into that. I can take a look at the Southeast. You know, any one of these regions that I want to take a look at, I can drill in and out. So this is that master filter capability that we talked about earlier, that gives me that capability to be able to drill in and out of the information that we're looking at, right? So quickly and easily being able to drill into that particular instance of the you know, looking for that Midwest information, right? In addition to that, I can turn that off and utilize the filtering capabilities on the right-hand side here if I want to look for specifically the Midwest region, right, and drill into that to try and give me understanding of what's going on there, right? So being able to view the information for each one of the states. So I can see here the size of the bubble is the margin, and the color of it is the number of units that were sold, right, for that particular region, right? So get an understanding of that, and I can see here along the bottom, you know, the stores that perform the poorest, right, in terms of the number of units they sold, which is primarily 0, versus the stores that are really performing well in terms of the number of units they're selling, and then the margin that they're selling. So, you know, further out we go, the more units they're selling, maybe the margin isn't that quite as great, but they're selling more of it. So those might be some things that we want to model in that particular region around what's occurring there. And I can take a look at the store types, right, by this radio button here. So if I want to take a look at in-town, maybe I want to take a look at mall, you know, and this is a multi-select capability. So I'm adding content in or removing by each button that I select. Taking a look at just mall now, maybe I want to take a look at just retail park, right? So being able to drill into that capability and quickly pull that type of information back is something that we can do here, right? And just keep in mind that this record count that I'm pulling back here, you know, this sales history record count, that's the fact table that we're working against, is 100 million records, right? So we're getting an understanding of the sheer volume of data that we're pulling back from Columbus on this PDA box, and we're getting sub-second performance in terms of doing ad hoc analytics around that, right? So I'm not necessarily seeing exactly what it is that I want to see here. So what I might want to do is do some more ad hoc analysis in terms of going into Workspace Advanced and creating a crosstab of one of these particular charts to show me the actual raw data for this. So what I'm going to do is just select the Do More capability here, and that's going to open up into Workspace Advanced. And now I'm really starting to slice and dice the information, right? So before, what I was doing is I was looking at report parts. Well, now what I'm doing is I'm actually looking at individual database field and table level objects to allow me to play around with the information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually delete this particular chart here, and I'm going to take a look at a crosstab, right? So looking at this particular interface, we can see that, you know, folks that have used Excel or other productivity software, we should be able to pick this up quickly because we've got the same type of file menu across the top, the same kind of buttons and so forth. I've got a source tab here that allows me to look at my one version of my organizational truth, right? That singular point of instance that everybody trusts in terms of where the data came from. You know, if I want to get an understanding of where something comes from, I can use the lineage capability to pull that up and get an understanding of where that information is coming from, right? So we can trace it back all the way to the data source. We can look at the field name that was in the database table, and then the way it's presented via the metadata layer, right? So if that changes, you can trace it back. So at your fingertips, when somebody asks you, where is that information coming from? At any particular juncture, I can figure out where that's coming from. So it eliminates that distrust of where did you get your data, right? Everybody's got transparency into where that information came from. I've got toolbox capability here, and now instead of working with report parts, I'm working with individual field and table level objects, like I said. So I can create charts, visualizations, lists, you know, create a nice looking report if I wanted to, right? But for this particular instance, I'm looking at the Midwest region, and I wanted to get an understanding of what's going on there. So what I want to do is actually drag a crosstab onto my canvas here and start adding content in. So what I want to do is take a look at my region and drag that on. And keep in mind, you know, I'm going against this large data set that we talked about earlier, right? So I'm looking at region. I'm going to take a look at the state that those particular regions are looking at. And that's going to come in. And then what I'm going to do is actually bring in the measures in terms of my unit, my price, and my margin. I'm going to add that in. And that's that large fact table that we talked about, right? 100 million records. Boom. You're there, right? And very quickly, you know, blown away by the speed. And, you know, from there, I can go into the properties of this and start changing around the way that the data is formatted, right? So units, unit margin, and price, I can make that a number, you know, with 0 decimal places. And, you know, you can see the way that is formatted, right? So everything on this workspace has got a property, and it can be individually worked with so that you can get something. But, you know, once again, I wanted to take a look at the particular, let's see, location. I wanted to take a look at just the Midwest, right? So I want to filter that down to Midwest, just to include that. And I've just got the Midwest now, and I can see the units and the margin and so forth. And I can add that back into my workspace here, and then communicate that information back up to my executive or my management team via the activity in the workspace here to give me an understanding of, you know, what was done in terms of looking at the information and you know, giving an update in terms of, you know, here are the units that we sold in this particular region, you know, at this particular price. And here are some of the stores that are very successful at doing that. And maybe we should take a look at retail parks instead of in town and malls in this particular region to drive more profitable business. But keeping again once in mind that I can do this kind of speed of thought analytics through the capabilities of PureData for analytics, running against extremely large volumes of data and just, you know, answering questions as they're being asked rather than having to wait on information as it comes about. So that brings me to the end of the demonstration. Does anybody have any questions around that? Thank you for your time.